So thanks. I'm super excited to be part of this session with the other great presenters, having read over their submissions as well. My name is Bill O'Brien. I'm a sixth-year assistant professor at University of Illinois Chicago, and my presentation is called Teaching Advanced Excel Skills and Analytical Techniques in an Intro Finance course. So unlike a lot of the higher level finance courses, I've spent 6 years teaching an Intro to Corporate Finance course. Finance majors and non-finance majors alike take it. And the technique that I've come up with is addressed to address two different dilemmas. One is a dilemma that I see students facing as they take this course, and another one is a dilemma that I face as an instructor having to provide good instruction to 300 or 400 people at a time. So the dilemma for students is kind of I view it like this. Here's a timeline of a student's typical college life. You're hopefully trying to get an internship after your third year, graduate by your fourth year. So in order for that to happen, you're doing interviews starting from the right-hand side, halfway through or even at the beginning of your senior year. And then hopefully you've got an internship. In order to interview for that internship, you've got to be doing interviews as far as your first semester of your junior year. And then if you start on the left-hand side of the timeline, unless you've come in with 40 or 50 advanced placement hours, you're probably spending your first year taking a lot of general education courses. And then to get a good head start in even an intro finance course, you probably should take some accounting and economics. Not strictly necessary, but always kind of a good idea. So somewhere in the middle of this lies this intro to finance course, right? So this course needs to do a lot because you're facing this pressure that in order to land a good job, especially in the economic climate we're facing now, you've really got to be starting to look for jobs as a junior or a beginning of your junior year, but you're not ready to take an intro to finance class until just about that same time. So if you're a student, that intro to finance course really needs to deliver a lot of skills and knowledge to you that can land you an internship and succeed in that internship. Now, as an instructor, I face my own sort of set of dilemmas. The way that I choose to teach and evaluate students, I sort of in my head at least plotted on two dimensions. So on the y-axis of this box, I'm going to say is whatever I'm trying to do for these students implementable, right? Is it something I can do in a large class size? Is there potential for cheating? So if it's implementable, I'm going to put it at the top of the y-axis. If it's not, I'm going to put it at the bottom. And then there's a difference between something being implementable and something actually being useful to the students. So I have usefulness down on the x-axis, high usefulness, low usefulness. You can plot it there. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody that teaches finance for a living, but a lot of the times, the things you can do in a class live along a linear line with a slope of -1, right? So you can ask multiple choice tests, and that's pretty easy to grade, and it's not a lot of work, but that doesn't have a lot of value to students outside of the classroom other than evaluation purposes. I'd say the same thing about quizzes and tests in general. For big intro sections, you can assign case studies, but that stuff kind of mysteriously starts popping up online from time to time. It becomes more and more difficult to grade. And the more kind of ad hoc or less straightforward stuff that you give them, project work, open-ended questions, that stuff not only becomes a lot difficult to grade fairly, but you just kind of lose control of being in the classroom environment and ensuring academic integrity. So where we'd all like to live is what I think is like the upper right-hand box of this grid, right? We want to find work that's not only practical and adaptable to different environments for the students, but as an instructor, it's hard to cheat or game this stuff, easy for us to grade. And most importantly, I think it's got to really add some value to these students because the job search starts pretty immediately after this intro course. So what can we give them that they can actually implement and use to land a full-time position? So my attempt to solve this problem was almost to create a parallel curriculum that I teach students along with Intro to Corporate Finance. So along with sort of the normal Intro to Corporate Finance stuff, I basically made a whole second curriculum that's based on learning advanced functions in Microsoft Excel. So I kind of drew a graph that looks like this. So I'm teaching finance in the classroom, and then outside of the classroom for the first half of the semester, I give the students a bunch of take-home assignments that allow them to learn and master Excel skills. So I focus on tools that I used. I worked for about 9 years as a financial analyst and manager. So these are the things that I used the most often and got me through my day-to-day job. Once they've learned that stuff, we can actually do more sophisticated things together as a class, and I can give them more meaningful project work that allows them to apply these Excel functions in the service of more advanced or meaningful financial analysis. So why Excel? I kind of view Excel as the Swiss Army knife of analytics, right? It's not maybe best in class at any one particular thing, but it can do a lot of things well enough, right? It can do ad hoc data analysis, reporting and dashboards. If you're creative, it can do a little bit of rudimentary risk modeling. It's a financial calculator. You can do capital budget and project tracking with it, forecasting. I wouldn't say you could do big data with it. Let's call it like medium data, right? You don't want to be going into the millions of rows in Excel, but you can use it in a pinch. Now, if I was going to do sophisticated risk modeling in a corporation, I wouldn't use Excel, right? I'd use a product like At Risk or Crystal Ball or something. In the same way that if I was cutting a 2x4, I wouldn't use the little sawtooth knife on a Swiss Army knife. I would use a circular saw or something, right? And for big data, you want to use R, SAS data. You want to use a cordless drill for a home improvement project rather than a tiny Phillips head. But Excel is good enough at enough of these things, and it interfaces with these more sophisticated tools so that it allows students to really have a level of confidence and a level of versatility that's going to help them in their jobs. So the way this works is, and I'll go over kind of the first half of the semester and then the second half. In that first half, when I'm having students learn and master these Excel tools, while in class, I'm teaching them the basics of a corporate finance curriculum like cash flow analysis, time value of money, stock and bond valuation, risk and return. Outside of class, they're doing 3 training assignments that slowly get progressively more difficult, where they're at first just learning the basics of cell referencing and VLOOKUP formulas. Then I start teaching them if statements, $ anchoring, all the way to goal seeking and visual basic macros. So in order to get students comfortable with Excel who may have never even clicked on the icon before, I was debating what kind of training assignments to give them. And the solution that I came up with was basically inventing a fake database of customers in a fake company. So I kind of had fun with this. I went to a random name generator on the internet. I created 4,000 fictional customers. I gave these customers a little bit of flavor or characteristics. So they have 6 different states that they could be customers in. There's 2 different years of their data, whether the customer is new with the company or whether they're renewing their contract, whether they're canceling their policy. The idea here was to give them some detail that allows them to dig in and really see what Excel can do. But hopefully it's intuitive and not, 100 columns of data that's totally overwhelming for people. So in the first half of the semester, they're learning these basic Excel tools. The first assignment focuses on those 3 highlighted functions there, and it's pretty basic. All I have them do is write a VLOOKUP formula that joins together 2 data sheets by a unique customer identifier. That's it, right? It takes most people 15 or 20 minutes, but it hopefully increases folks' confidence and shows them, here's the proper way to use VLOOKUP. The second assignment gets into, well, when you have Excel and you have a 4,000 customer database, can you do some things that let you summarize the data across different dimensions, right? Can we look at customer trends and results by state or by year? So on this screenshot, these yellow cells are what I asked the students to fill out themselves, right? So they want to summarize using either SUMIFs or COUNTIFs or pivot tables what fraction of the customers in any particular state in this fake database are canceling their policies. And then right at about the halfway point of the semester, they have a harder assignment that uses more sophisticated functions like drop-down menus and conditional formatting. I created basically a variance analysis template. All of the data characteristics that I talked about for the customers roll up to top line revenue or premium for the company. So I have them basically fill some missing cells in to complete this variance analysis sheet, do some conditional formatting in that % change column so that trends pop out a little bit more cleanly, and then build a drop-down menu and rewire this sheet so that it goes from being a country level or nation level report to looking at individual states results, right? And goal seek different trends and things like that. So in order to enable students to do this outside of class, this is a screenshot of the Blackboard portal for students. I provide them a video that doesn't really go over how to do everything, but just gets them started, talks about the point of the assignment a little bit. I also give them pretty detailed instructions in Microsoft Word. That's the third link on the screen. They have their own database that they develop and that they download rather and start working with. And then they put their answers on a Google sheet that the whole class shares. So I'm not getting 400 Excel file attachments in my email, and I'll explain how that works in a second. So the students get a Word document that kind of looks like this. There's a bunch of them. This is just a screenshot of one part of one of them. I want the instructions to get the students 80 to 90% of the way there without necessarily giving away the answers, right? The final formulas and the final aha light bulb moments are up to them to come up with. So I try to organize this so they're a little bit easy to read, just because nobody likes to read really long Word documents. Black bold text are the actual tasks or calls to action that I want them to do. Blue text are formulas that go right into the cells in Microsoft Excel. Regular text is just the general instructions. And for the people that really get into this stuff, I have some stuff in gray italicized text there that's nice to know, but you can skip over it if you're on deadline. But the people that really get into this kind of appreciate having extra context of why we're doing the things that we're doing. I think students would learn more if they actually have to read this and then apply it. I could just record a video of me doing all the steps and have them regurgitate it, but I think they learn more this way. The first sheet in the database that they download looks like this. So there's a space for their name and their 9-digit student ID. It's very important, and I emphasize over and over again, that they put in their name and student ID before they start any of the work. There's a specific reason for this that I'll talk about. How this assignment works and how it deters cheating is that by putting in their name and student ID, students get a unique answer to the assignment. So I'll talk about that in a slide or two, but basically every student's going to have a different result from the assignment. And then I ask them, in order to show me that you've completed the assignment, put 2 or 3 pieces of information from this completed Excel file into a Google Sheet. And then when I take all of those answers and pull them into my instructor answer key, I can basically reverse engineer a couple of things and grade whether they did the assignment correctly. Now that sounds kind of complicated, and I suppose it is, but think of it this way, and this is a guidance that I provide for anyone that wants to use this. Out of the 4,000 customers in this database, let's say 3,998 have values that don't change, right? But for a couple of customers in there, their particular values of, like, let's say their refund that they get when they cancel, are dependent on information that the students put in their name and ID. So that nasty equals round formula in the middle of the sheet basically says for this particular customer, 21224, their cancellation refund is going to be equal to the middle 5 digits of their student ID divided by the number of characters in their first and last name, right? Something absurd. And then I password protect it so that students can't see it. So the upshot is that for not every customer, but certain customers in the database, there are password protected formula generated answers that are unique for each student. So a quick picture of how this might look. I wired this up just for the session here, but here are 4 fake customers that could possibly be part of a student's right answer. Here's a bunch of fake student names and IDs. I pulled them from the same random name generator that I used to create the database. And then in green here would be a student's correct answer to the assignment. So when I shift F9 here to just draw a new name and 9-digit ID at random, you can see that these answers start to change for folks, right? The value that they have to put in for cancellation refund and the name that they have to put in for the second largest canceling customer changes for a lot of the students, right? And then when you look at what the actual Google Doc looks like where they submit their answers, you get a pretty good range of answers, right? You could tell if your answer was totally off from other people's if you were a student, but there's no value in just waiting for the 10 smartest students in the class to do the assignment first and then copying their answers, right? You're just going to submit the assignment to me by putting in, for this part, columns D and E, right? And just from those 2 pieces of information, I can know if you did the assignment right. Because again, most of the customers have static values in there, but I know which customers have dynamic values based on the student's name and ID, and I can reverse engineer those to grade it pretty easily, right? Students' solutions are unique and very little is gained from seeing other students' answers. Now, that's all kind of the preamble to what I think is the real value add of this assignment is once they have this comfort level at the halfway point in the semester, we can start doing more cool and sophisticated things, combining Excel tools that they've learned with actual financial analysis work. So we can do things about capital budgeting, we can create pro formas, we can do really rudimentary risk modeling. So I'll give you just a few examples if I have time of those things. So one of the first things I asked them to do is a competitor comparison report. So of those Excel functions on the left, it's going to use all of these different skills that I've highlighted here, including a new one, concatenating text strings that I teach them along with the assignment. So the idea here is, I can ask them to memorize what the quick ratio is or what return on assets is. But in order to properly analyze financial ratios, you need context, right? If a company has a 40% debt ratio, is that good? Is that bad? We don't really know unless we analyze it within itself over time, if we analyze it versus its competitors, if we understand the trade-off between debt ratios and other financial ratios like ROE that the company has. So in order to do that, I give students this blank template, and I ask them, well, you're going to go to the internet and you're going to basically pull a bunch of data that's going to allow you to create a report that compares 7 different tech companies. So the way this works is if I go to this sheet, which has a bunch of instructions here that I won't bother with, if they go to Yahoo Finance, they copy and paste a bunch of data and they paste it in one of these yellow cells that I've provided for them and follow the instructions. I've built some things that allow them to really quickly create a text string on the left that allows you to look up a financial statement item combined with the company name. And then I task them with figuring out how to write a VLOOKUP formula like the one I've showed you right here that can reference that information, wire it to essentially a drop-down menu so that when you change the name of the company here, all the data dynamically updates. So this is something that they're able to complete by 2/3 of the way through an intro finance course, which I think is pretty cool, right? And then all the ratios over here are calculated, and it allows them to very quickly compare liquidity ratios across 7 tech companies or compare their debt ratios. So I think they got to get a lot of value out of doing that. The next task that I have them do is creating pro formas. You know, you can generate pro formas on paper, but really to see the interaction between a lot of different decisions that a finance person would have to make, I think generating them in Excel is a good way to do it. So they use cell referencing, $ anchoring, and goal seeking. So the concept that's reinforced here is that capital structure and capital budgeting are intertwined, right? You may have a plan of growing the company in the next year, but do you have enough debt financing to do it? Do you need to adjust your payout ratio? So by wiring up a pro forma themselves in Excel, they can kind of see those trade-offs. And I give them an example of doing it for Tesla. Everybody likes talking about Tesla, right? It's an interesting company with an interesting CEO. But I give them sort of a blank pro forma, and I say, you basically have instructions here as to how you're going to generate the pro forma formulas in all of these cells. And just for the sake of teaching it better, I have some filled out pro formas for Apple, right? Where all these green cells are usually linked to this growth rate percentage here. As we change this growth rate number here, all the pro forma data changes. And you can also make calls on how much dividends to pay out, whether you want your long-term debt to change or not. And the idea is that this Excel sheet is not going to balance if you either have too much financing to know what to do with, or you have not enough debt financing to fund your growth. So I ask students to go into data and to use their goal seeking to say, well, what value could we grow at that makes it so that we have just enough financing to exactly fund our growth? And by doing that, you can say, okay, for Apple, their sustainable growth rate is 25.23%. So I asked them to wire up Tesla, figure out that same thing using goal seeking. Just for the sake of time, I'll do maybe 1 or 2 more of these and briefly talk about the other ones. This one I kind of like. This is basically turning Excel into a really rudimentary risk modeling software. So the idea is by using macros and random number generation, you can look at a practical way of how companies measure risk dynamically, maybe get at the idea of some of this too big to fail stress testing that came out of post 08-09 regulations. So again, looking at Tesla, I have a sheet here that randomly does pro forma projections using a bunch of random number generation here. If I do Shift 9, you can see this changes the pro forma. And what I ask students to do is basically run simulations and record what the pro forma debt ratio looks like for Tesla, right? And then write a macro that takes those pro forma debt ratios and makes a list of them on the other sheet, right? So we're running simulations here essentially by clicking this macro button, right? And there's a right way to do this, right? If you can't make a macro repeatable if you keep going down here, but if all you're doing is inserting a new row and then pasting a new value into the same cell, you can make this macro go on and on forever, right? And at some point, if I go to the developer macro menu and look at this, you can even do some rudimentary Visual Basic editing and say, well, this all looks like a repeated process. I could just copy and paste this. So instead of 3 trials, it's running 100. And then when I click the button, I have less work that I have to do, right? So that's the idea behind this assignment. Some of the other things that students are able to do, they're able to do, a stock price analysis where just a simple if statement lets them see what days were there big stock price changes and makes that pop out. And then I ask them to go online and find what information dropped that day. So, how are our discount rates and cash flow expectations affecting stock prices. There's a rudimentary NPV analysis that basically goes back to the fake customer database and says, we offer a discount for new customers to come to the company. How can you figure out how that customer's lifetime value affects your company, even though we're losing money on them in the first year? So they're using these cancellation rates that they established in an earlier part of the assignment to say, well, let's model out what the lifetime value of a single customer is. We're going to use that cancellation rate to say how likely are they to be with us after 1, 2, 3, or 4 months. And then you can use that to calculate NPV. And then there's just some teaching tools also. If I go to portfolio, there's a portfolio diversification example that I'll skip over. And then here's a loan calculator. If you're teaching different types of loans, you can show them, you can create a drop-down menu here, and you can see the difference between an interest-only loan, a discount loan, and an amortized loan. And that helps them play with the concepts and reinforce it on their own. I know I'm short on time here, so just 2 or 3 more slides. The cost of implementing this isn't financial because this is all free and Excel is free to students, but you do have to learn the relevant Excel skills if they're new to you. The good news is that I've used teaching assistants over the years, and they haven't been as familiar with this stuff, and they find that actually doing the assignments themselves gets them up to speed pretty quick, and they'll learn quicker than the median student would learn just by virtue of being a graduate student. So I also provide answer keys and everything that not only tells students how this is working, but also gives job aids to instructors so this stuff doesn't seem so mysterious and is at least a little straightforward to reverse engineer for grading. The materials are free to both students and instructors. I think they're pretty easily transferable. I've honed this stuff over 5 years. Grading is automated. There's all these built-in safeguards. Like I always say to students, if you can figure out how I got you a different value than your peers, then go ahead and try to cheat. It's probably going to be less work for you to just read the instructions and do it anyway. You can scale it to larger sections. It's, I think, pretty attractive to intentional employers. And what's been nice is I've gotten some buy-in now that I've been doing it for 5 of my 6 years. Students tell other students to take my course just because they know they're going to learn this stuff that's going to be attractive to employers. I had one student that interned in an investment bank while he was taking my course, immediately put it to work. So I've just collected some of the things from my evaluations and emails that I got. So I feel like students can use this right away, and that's kind of the beauty of this project. So I'm really excited I got to share this with you guys. My email is here. I'll put it in the chat if we need to, but I'm happy to share the materials or set up a meeting to talk about it in greater detail.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. And yes, please put your email address in the chat box so people can email you directly. So thank you very much. Well, we do have about 5 minutes for Q&A.
So I see the question from David. So I would say that for the first half of the semester, students are it's probably 4/5 in-class work, 1/5 Excel class, or Excel work outside of class. I'd say in the second half of the semester, the Excel project work that I assign them and the stuff I do inside and outside of the class becomes maybe even a bigger focus than the tests and quizzes that I give them. So it starts kind of light, and then by the end of the semester, if I have office hours, this is usually the thing they're talking to me about during office hours. So I would say it's not a small amount of work, but most people understand why I'm assigning it, and they see the value of it.
Bill, this is Subbu from University of New Mexico. I have a question for you.
Sure, Subbu, thanks.
So you mentioned about the Excel VB macros.
Yes.
I'm just curious to know what kind of tasks or what kind of code the students develop or write. Do they write codes on Excel VB macro, or what kind of tasks do they accomplish using Excel VB macro?
Sure. So one clarification is I don't have students write the code from scratch. What I have them do is record their steps and then play it back. And we have a separate course offered in our information decision sciences majors that's all about VBA programming. But for their training assignments, I have them basically generate a report that shows the top 10 customers by state And the test that I give them is, if you're in a work environment, you're going to be updating reports. You want to get those reports done quickly so that you can do actual value-added analysis. So I say, I'm going to give you new data, and you're going to already have this macro written and wired to create this report so that you just click the button and it's done, right? So you're not doing sorting and conditional sort of looks at things. So they learn to do just writing and recording the code to create this sort of top 10 report for customers in this database. And then I have them record the steps like I showed you to do, stress testing for a balance sheet to see what company debt ratios are and run simulations.
Oh,
so those are kind of the two VB macro tasks, but it's all record, hit the record button, do the steps.
I understand. It's not they don't go into VB environment and write the code there, but they just record the button and then the Excel just records the VB script.
Yeah. It hopefully piques their interest. I've had one student say that they used, in their programming course, they kind of said, well, let's take the task from the finance course and try to engineer a more sophisticated way to do this. So hopefully it piques their interest, but it's not definitely a programming course, and I'd recommend students take the VBA course to really get a sophisticated look at it.
I understand. That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill, I have hopefully a quick question.
Sure, Robbie.
It seems to me like it's 3 courses going on in this. One is our standard 3-credit finance course, where we teach all the finance concepts, including things like financial forecasting with how to use the plug to balance the balance sheet and all those things. The second is intermediate level skills in Excel in context of this course.
Right.
And the third is a few projects where you marry the 2 things and apply them to those 3 or 4 projects that you work on.
Yes.
My question is, how much pushback do you get from the students where once they realize that as to how much you're asking them to do?
Well, the drop date's already passed before they realize how much they have to do. So usually they're stuck. No, more seriously, I think that there's a range of views on it. If you're somebody who's maybe not a finance major, who's not going to do this stuff, they're usually like, why? I'll hear that on my reviews every year. Like, why are you this stuff? I'm never going to use this stuff. Right. But I think, I would say that the way you described it is accurate. But it's really 2 courses in one for the whole semester. That first half is the intermediate training and finance stuff. And the second half is project Excel work and finance stuff. So I try not to ever triple up on them. But that's the thing that the good students come back to and say that they appreciate.
And clearly good students.
No. It's exactly. But you're right. It's a lot. It's a heavy ask for an intro course.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.